since we're born, we're taught to be the good girl. And what does a good girl do? She
Yeah.
overachieves, overcares, always smiles, put everyone's needs before her own, people pleasing. So you're actually learning from a very young age to
Hmm.
compromise who you are, to repress your needs and feelings, to actually not be authentic, but try to fit into a certain role.
I'll have what she's having.
Welcome to another edition of
She talks confidence.
Podcast.
Real stories, real women. This is about confidence. This is about creating it, having it, owning it, being it. This is the She Talks Confidence podcast. This is Tony, your host, as usual. And today, another very powerful guest.
How are
It's
you?
Lamiaa Daif. The reason Lamiaa is on today is because she has an amazing story, a personal story. Is she actually had a TED Talk about this story. And the TED Talk was called What Your Body Knows and Your Mind Ignores. It's about listening to your body, which is something that I've been harping on for years and years with my clients and on the show. It's about aligning your body, aligning your mind, and aligning your soul, listening to your gut, listening to your intuition, getting really introspection and getting in touch with who you are. Trust your gut, trust your body. And so, Lamiaa, can you start off by talking about what happened?
So the story started 8 years ago when I woke up one morning and my face was completely deformed. I could barely recognize myself. My body was full of hives from head to toe. And I thought it was an allergy when you have those big allergies and need a cortisone shot right away. But when I got to the hospital, the diagnosis was different. It wasn't an allergy. And in fact, I woke up that way many times for months until I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that came with those chronic hives. And interestingly, at that time, from the outside, my life looked perfect. I was just appointed the youngest female director in the largest private equity fund in Europe. I was about to get married to my college sweetheart. I was traveling the world. I lived in Paris at that time and was enjoying everything the city had to offer. On paper, it looked like I had it all. But interestingly, inside of me, it was a whole different story. And in fact, before I woke up that way, for months, if not years, to be honest, I had been feeling this internal unease that I couldn't really put into words. I was always exhausted and always anxious and overthinking, and sleep wasn't good, and all those symptoms that kind of left me confused. I was constantly asking myself, why am I feeling this? Why am I not genuinely happy and fulfilled? And it just didn't make sense.
And did you think it was a psychological thing where you're like, okay, this is a mental health thing versus
I thought that actually that stress I was feeling was the byproduct of success because success meant sacrifice. And I looked pretty successful. And yeah, that's what
aha.
you have to deal with, right? But I didn't have the courage, to be honest, to dig deeper and understand the root cause behind this. Not just the late night at work, but there was something way deeper than that going on. So initially, I did what many of us do, try to ignore those sensations and inconvenient feelings. But guess what? It didn't go away.
Right.
Also, many of us do is try to look for answers and solutions outside of myself, always looking for the next thing. Okay, maybe the next promotion
Oh
and
yeah.
I'll feel finally okay.
Yeah.
When after that next vacation, after I moved from Paris to New York, after my wedding, after this, and that after would come and then big disappointment, or maybe it would feel okay or a little bit better for a moment, but then it would go away. And so I got in this cycle of like constantly chasing that inner feeling at the end outside of myself and creating more and more disconnection with my body, with my intuition. And because we're talking about confidence here, the paradox was the more successful I was getting, the less confident I was. The moment of truth for me happened a couple of years after I woke up that way. I had moved to New York, and what was supposed to be the American dream turned into the American nightmare. And here I was facing a double divorce. So, divorcing from double at the same time from both my
Double.
husband and my job. And what's interesting is that this time, from the outside,
Mm.
it looked like the lowest point in my life. And everyone was worried around me, like, how is she literally going to survive her life collapsing? But interestingly, as I was going through the hardest time of my life, for sure, I didn't have any hives. My blood work was completely normal. And deep down, I could feel something inside of me that I actually had ignored and silenced for so long, like whispering, like, it's going to be okay. And this was a big game
Hmm.
changer in my life because what I understood is that all these years, my body knew and was trying to share that truth with me.
Do you think it took all of that piling on you from the outside to finally get that thing to switch, to finally get you to
It did take that big wake up call because the whispers were not enough to have my full attention.
Yeah, but that happens all the time, right? With people with leverage, it has to take an end of a marriage or a child leaving you or a tragedy of some sort to get you to finally do that. And the key to confidence, the key to listening and understanding and having levels of trust with your intuition is not needing to get to that level before making a change and to be able to hone in to listen. And that's what I love about your story as you're talking about it to this point is that it's so incredibly important to have all of the facets aligned and for you to listen to that instead of looking exterior for either exterior validation or as you are a professional carrot mover from what I've heard, constantly moving the carrot. And I know because that's my
Mm.
MO in my whole life. Nothing was ever good enough because you reach it, then you thought, if I can reach this, then it's not that big of a deal, right? And you reach it, then you have the expectation that you're going to feel better, and
Absolutely.
you don't, and then you're like, I guess it's something else,
Mhm.
and then you keep going and you keep going. When you finally got to the point where you started hearing the whisper, how did it present itself, and then what did you do from there? What was that first step into?
Absolutely. It was physical sensations. Like our bodies, my body talks to
Mm,
me in sensations. So that heart rate, that chest expansion
mhm,
or contraction, that pit in your stomach, those goosebumps, those tinglings, that jaw clenching, the quality of your sleep, like all the tension, the discomfort, like all these signals that I started paying attention to and just like starting to feel like, oh, this feels good. Then what does this mean to me? This feels like not a stressful situation, not like an anxiety state in which I've been living for years. This actually feels good. So it started tuning into what feels good and what feels less good, what feels comfortable versus not. And in some ways,
mm,
starting to
mhm,
relearn the language of my body. Because at the end, we were born speaking this language. If you think
mm,
of babies, you observe a child, they connect so naturally
mhm.
with their desires and needs for their bodies and spontaneously express whatever they want to express. A baby won't think, oh, I feel this, start overthinking the thing. I'm not going to wake my parents up at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's repression. So we feel and we repress. It doesn't mean that we don't know. I deeply believe that we always know. Deep down, you always know. But then we pretend not to know. We pretend we need more information. We
Mhm,
pretend we need advice. We pretend we need to outsource that decision. And our minds are amazing at creating those stories and narratives that keep us maybe like comfortable and safe or at least like some perception of safety and security, but ultimately prevents you from living that truth and authenticity.
mhm,
And only relying on your mind for me is like only using half of your intelligence. We have this other half that we were born naturally tapping
mhm,
into, which is your body's wisdom. And combine the logic of your mind and your body's wisdom, and you're truly unstoppable. And finally, can create that alignment, that fulfillment, whatever
mhm,
is that inner feeling that you're looking for. And so, to answer your second question of what that first step looks like, my first step was starting therapy. That was the immediate first step
mhm,
because I knew, and my family was also super supportive and encouraged me in that path, is that it wasn't just a relationship ending. It wasn't just a job ending, it was what I had completely identified myself with for 10 years that was collapsing. It was like everything I thought I was and I want it gone. And
Mhm.
so that is an identity crisis.
It's a 100% identity crisis. Because your identity was
Absolutely.
your job. Your identity was being in that relationship. And how many times does that happen where, especially with women, you guys and it's not like on purpose, right? But you like freely just give your identity over because you feel as though there's something that you've got to conform to it, or is that's your role in the case. Interestingly enough, how big of a detachment is that from your soul and from your body and from all your foundation stuff? Because you've talked about the fact that all of a sudden, basing your actions, you're basing your career, you're basing your relationship, your marriage on a foundation
Mhm.
that you don't have a say in it. It's where are your foundation, your ideals, your morals, your values, the things that matter the most to you. They're either you don't know them because you've suppressed them, or you haven't developed them, or they come up once in a while and then you deny them. And that's that whole thing about not listening to your intuition. And I love the fact that you talk about this in this, not that it happened to you because that's terrible, but the fact that your
Yeah,
body finally says, hey, hold on, enough's enough. It finally overrides. It finally creates these things, and that's what happens constantly. Also, with people that kind of take the back seat and compromise and give and give.
yeah,
That whole thing about the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's all of that energy that you have not released and you have not dealt with. And from an
it just
identity
explodes.
standpoint, it finally goes boom and it just explodes. And it could be on your man not taking out the trash, right? For the 18,000th time that you ask him to do it. And that's not that big of a deal, right? But then all of a sudden, it is a huge deal because that was it. Because and that has nothing really to do with it. That's the surface thing that has to do with the fact your body finally says,
Absolutely.
I can't hold anything more in the tank, and you let it go. So that brings me around to one quick question before we get into maybe some tips. The question is, with your story and with my clients that come in and they talk about very similar things, not to the degree that you had, because that was terrible. It's a whole chicken and egg thing. What came first? Was it the mental
Mhm.
outlook in terms of
Yeah,
the self-worth thing, or was it a really a genetic predisposition, right? A genetic issue with autoimmune, and then that kind of started the whole thing about you reading those signals wrong or having those signals override you and having to prove
yeah,
yourself
totally.
outside when it was kind of.
Genetic part, right? And like epigenetics will tell you that it's not rigid and fixed. Like some genes are activated and some others not. And your mind plays a big role in this.
Mm-hmm.
The way I understand it is
Yeah.
I look at the root cause, not at the symptom. For me, the disease is the symptom, but there's something underneath it that was built for years and
Mm-hmm.
years. And what you said about like why in particular women have to go through this. Because since we're born, we're taught to be the good girl. And what does a good girl do? She
Yeah.
overachieves, overcares, always smiles, put before everyone's needs before her own, people pleasing. So you're actually learning from a very young age to
Mm-hmm.
compromise who you are, to repress your needs and feelings, to actually not be authentic, but try to fit into a certain role. Actually, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this, about two universal needs that we all have, which is the need of attachment and the need of authenticity. And we need both. You need to belong to the tribe to survive, but also you need an authentic expression of yourself. When these two needs are in competition, which is you want to be validated,
Mm-hmm.
you want to hear, I'm so proud of you, you're such a good girl, right? That need of attachment is usually overriding the need of authenticity. But doing that for years has a huge cost,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in that journey, your body is what I
Mm-hmm.
call lie detector or accountability partner. It just, because it only lives in the present
Yeah. Yeah.
versus your mind worrying about past regrets, future worries, it does try to keep you accountable to that truth that you feel at that moment. And it's not that you don't feel. It's not that I didn't feel. Like now that I'm becoming more aware and present, there are many times where I'm like, I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to do this. I knew from the beginning that I actually wanted to say no to that person or no to that situation. And yet I ended up saying yes. So I've been feeling it in my body. And then I override the body
Mm-hmm.
because of those beliefs, because of those automatic patterns, conditionings, beliefs that are way louder and that are all fear based. And when fear is around, it's a sense
Mm-hmm.
of safety, right? A perceived
Mm-hmm.
safety that is playing here. So I'm always going to play it safe. So I'm always going to choose attachment and belonging over authenticity. So it's really deconstructing all this process
Mm-hmm.
and getting to the root cause. Understanding, for me, was understanding, why did I repress? Why did I stay in a job, in a relationship that deep down I knew something was fundamentally not working anymore? It doesn't mean it never worked. It maybe worked when I was 18, but not when I turned 30. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
What is the deep fear
Mm-hmm.
behind it? What is that deep belief behind it that is just run automatically? It's not even conscious, right? It's like these programming that has been there for years and years and just activates that. It activates that nervous system response of, oh, there is a danger here, there is a threat here. So, and then just the cycle automatically plays out.
Neural pathways that are developed. And with girls, they're developed to be, you talked about the good girl, which is
Yes.
amazing. I think it was Carol Dweck, the one that does the growth mindset stuff. I think it was her that said, if life was one just prolonged grade
Mm.
school classroom, women would rule the world, because you guys are emotionally more mature at the time. You are way more adept at picking up on cues like that. That's why you're like the good girl thing. That's why you don't want to ruffle things. That's why you want to, have the correct answers, and you do a good job. But the problem is that's not serving you outside of the classroom, not serving you as you get to in an adult environment or a business environment where you have to now not necessarily compete, but you have to integrate into that system, which is totally different, right? That's where you have to have the guy thing, where you have to have some level of ground to stand on and to make your mark and to express yourself in a way that's going to be, respected not only for you from you, but for other people. So I love the when you brought up that good girl thing. Now the thing that is the hardest thing to do, and
Mhm.
agree or disagree, from what I've seen with clients and also myself, once you realize that it's your life and the bubble that you've created around yourself has been built on the exterior expectations and the neural pathways that were developed, the freeways really that were developed in your brain a long time ago. And you literally have to go out there with a wrecking ball now and knock them down and reroute your roads, right, to the places that are going to serve you,
Mhm.
like your foundation and your values. And I mean, your choices, not what you expect other people to, what their expectations are. It's like a free fall. You talked about having a free. It is the toughest part to trust yourself, to
Mhm.
trust your therapist or however you are getting help, and to just ride out the construction part, and then to create, because on the other side of it, as it's a little harder because the more aware you are of your own stuff, the more it's the red pill, right? In the matrix.
Yeah.
Once you're out of the matrix, you see how it works, and you have to be totally accountable for
Yeah.
yourself in terms of choosing in or out. So that's the hard part. And then reconstructing the roads. Is that, how have you
Yes.
been doing that since
Fully
all of
agree
that
with
happened?
everything you just shared. And yes, it is the hardest part of the journey. For me, the past 8 years were both the most empowering, incredible years of growth and transformation and almost like a rebirth, to be honest. And the hard ones too. It's not an easy journey because at the end it's a real journey of
Hmm.
reinvention, but not to be
Hmm.
someone else, to actually and become everything you're not, to reconnect with that essence that was always there. If I had to summarize it, I love
Yeah.
frameworks. I think frameworks. For me, that journey was 3 C's. The first C is clarity. I was completely confused on who I was, on what I wanted. I knew what I didn't want anymore, but I didn't know what I wanted. And I didn't know what did I believe personally versus what I just learned or inherited or right. So it's gaining that clarity over myself, over the direction
Yeah.
that I wanted to take, over the boundaries that I needed to set, over what felt good or not, right? Then the second C is confidence. is starting to build
Mhm.
that confidence that all these answers and solutions I'm looking for are not out there. They're here within me. So building that inner confidence. Because I did look for confidence for many years, but I looked for it in the wrong place, right? I looked for it outside of me when it's all within and it's being cultivated
Right.
within.
Yeah.
And the third
Yeah.
C is building the courage. To your point, it is not an easy journey. So how can you're still going to fear. I still feel it every time I have to make an aligned decision, say no when saying yes will actually be just easier, right? To
Mhm.
again honor myself and align it with that inner truth. So it's
Mhm.
building that courage, try to transcend that fear so that I do not override my body anymore. And in fact, start creating that alignment between mind and
Mhm.
body.
I'm just letting that sit for a bit because that was awesome. I just love that. The confidence thing is the reason why I do this and the reason why I work with women. It's because you already have the answers. You have it in you. It's not in a book. It's
Mhm.
not in a therapist. I don't give anybody confidence. I don't hand it to you. I don't write something down. It's all there. All
Absolutely.
I'm trying to do is get you to see it. That's my whole job, is to get you to see the fact that you have, because I can see it. I sit across from these women that come into me and from the women that I talk to on my show. I'm like, oh my God, powerful. But I mean, moving mountains type of a woman here.
Yeah.
And then they don't get it. They don't see it. And it's the most frustrating thing about my job is the fact that I'm like, hello. And so it's a matter of you have it already in you. And it is tough because you are getting back into things and the structure that you worked on and the people that are
Absolutely.
around you that know you from the old structure and, and may not be used to you
Mhm.
getting into your new
Yeah,
authentic
for
self.
sure.
You're going to lose some people, and you got to be okay with that. That's one of the hard parts, right, of
The
a
the cost is not losing
reorganization
yourself anymore. And
of
that's
your, exactly, because right. Because that's the
absolutely.
priority. It's not about losing somebody. It's about losing you.
Finally.
You are the priority, and finally, right?
Mhm.
Finally, you're the priority that you should have been since the beginning. But forces. Thank you
Having
so
me.
much. I really appreciate it. So, oh, you're so welcome. The TED Talk you can see Lamia do is what your body knows and your mind ignores. And
And you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, Lamiaa Daif. And my website is lamia.com. Very simple.
I will put those on the postings and stuff. And then where to find me, Tony at theconfidencedoc.com. I've got a new masterclass called How to Get Out of Toxic Relationships. It's a very concrete step by step to recognize it, talking about figuring out your stuff and not having anybody push your buttons. This is it. You realize you're in a toxic relationship. It's time to get out and get into your own authenticity. So you can always go to tonydufresne.com. So I hope things are
Awesome.
good.
Thank you so
And
much,
thank
Tony.
you again, Lamia. And we'll talk to you soon.